I'm Leandra Letterman.
And I'm Allison Christians, and it's time to break into tax.
Welcome to Tax Papers Unlocked. Today we'll be discussing the paper by Professor Dan Shaviro of New York University School of Law, The Economics, Law, and Politics of Seeking Increased Taxation of Multinationals.
Welcome, Dan. Here's the scenario. We're at a conference together and we're all about to step into the elevator and we want to hear about your latest research. So you probably have some kind of an elevator pitch. Will you share it with us?
I think this paper is kind of like Russian nesting dolls, one inside the other, but they're just two. The outer doll is, why has there been this big change in thinking about taxing multinational corporations being viewed more favorably now than it was 10 or 15 years ago by both academics and policymakers? The inner nesting doll is about how there have been similar changes throughout the field of legal scholarship, especially when it has an economics connection.
So Dan, this conference we're at is actually in New York City. And we're going to a reception on the 40th floor. So you have time to give us a bit more about your paper. Is there more for us that you can unlock?
Well, if it's the 40th floor, we must be in Midtown, I guess, which isn't my favorite part of town, but whatever. The Biden tax plan that was issued by the Treasury Department had an interesting push for taxing US and foreign multinationals more on both a residence and a source basis. And the interesting thing was, obviously, there's always politics behind all this, but they cited academic scholarship. And what they showed is really a change in the way that tax scholars and policymakers both have been thinking about taxing multinationals. You talk to a lot of people today, it sounds more like people 35 years ago, around the era of the Tax Reform Act of 86, and a lot less like people 15 years ago, when there was kind of this whole thing about territorials, the new world, and the corporate income taxes and the path to extinction and so forth. So there's been this interesting back and forth, and it parallels what's gone on in legal scholarship generally. I discussed something, I didn't invent this term, called Econ 101ism. There was kind of like the pre-economics stage of tax scholarship in the law schools. Then the sort of Econ 101 phase of everything is explained by simple supply and demand charts with everything being super simple. Now there's been the kind of the more advanced scholarship in which there's an understanding of how markets fail, rationality fails, how that can affect behavior. And actually that relates to why it seems now more feasible to tax multinationals than it used to seem.
So we've arrived at the 40th floor. We're at the reception. Not many people are here yet. So I think we have time for a few questions before we mingle.
So if I could ask a question, this 35 years ago, 15 years ago change, what has happened in the meantime is kind of an interesting spotlight on international tax in the sort of popular imagination. What do you think sort of sparked that?
I think it's really multi-causal. I mean, part of it is we went through, I talk in the paper, like even using a longer time frame, about how the era, like a lot older than us, that went through the Great Depression and the New Deal and thought that government is sort of the answer. Then the 80s and neoliberalism and Reagan, and the era of thinking that no, markets are the answer. And there have been a lot of shocks in the last 20 years, ranging from the financial collapse and before that Enron, to the COVID tragedy, to seeing Trump unleashed, all kinds of things like that. Meanwhile, in parallel, there's been just advancement in science, so to speak, in which people understand more why market failures matter, or at least they understand more formal terms why market failures matter and when they occur and when they change the analysis.
This paper provides really valuable insights into history, framing international tax and economics developments. And I'm wondering if there's a normative takeaway that you would like to leave people with.
Well, I guess two things. One is that modern economic and legal understandings today are very consistent with the idea that multinationals can be required to pay more tax on what they at least formally call both a source basis and a residence basis. The second takeaway is that we're not at the end of history today either, and who knows, things could change in the future, the debates could change, the answers could change. But for now, there does seem to be a strong case for increased taxation of multinationals, even if international cooperation falls a little short of the highest hopes that the proponents are placing on it right now.
All right, Dan, just before we go circulate with the other members of our conference, isn't getting multinational tax reform a little bit like herding cats?
I know you mean herding, H-E-R-D, and actually you can herd cats. My cats always follow me when they know I'm going to give them breakfast. So maybe there's a little bit of that here as well. Countries can potentially benefit from doing this. And also, there will always be internal political forces in particular countries that will believe they benefit from doing this. So a lot of it, I say in the paper at the end, one of the big things is really how left versus right politics plays out in the world. Because if the left, when left parties are winning in a lot of countries versus right parties, that'll tend to make this more feasible. Who will end up winning when? Of course, none of us know.
Let's hope that all the cats get a full bowl of milk in this scenario.
Dan, thanks so much for joining us today on Break Into Tax and unlocking for us your very interesting paper on taxation of multinationals.
Join us next time as you break into tax.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And ring the bell so you'll get a notification when we have a new video for you.
Meow, meow.